New PC and video games are not only capable of providing fun and excitement for everyone, but they can also give certain benefits and advantages. With the help of advanced technology and popularity, the gaming industry has advanced and expanded rapidly over the years. If we are looking for categorization of video games, they are broadly divided into 8 major categories. Action. These are fast-paced and may contain a large amount of violence due to this. Action games are usually inappropriate for children. Such games fall under the category M, mature rated. Examples are Halo, Star Wars, Jedi Knight and Enter the Matrix. Adventure and role-playing. These are normally not as graphic as action games and can take the player into surrealism and fantasy. Though adventure and role-playing games often contain violence, it is not found to be as intense as the violence in action games. Examples of this category are Borderlands 2, Final Fantasy, Legend of Mana and Billy Hatcher. First-person shooters. As the name implies, it is a game in which the player sees the action through the eyes of the character he is representing and involves the use of pistols or rifles to kill the enemy. Due to the violence involved in this genre of games, they are not suitable for young children. Examples of these games are Half-Life, Half-Life 2, Call of Duty, Modern Warfare, and so on. Construction and Management Simulation (CMS). As the name suggests, in the games belonging to this genre, the players are expected to build, expand and manage imaginary projects and communities with very little resources. Examples of this genre include SimCity and Harvest Moon. Strategy. Here the accent is on strategy rather than on violence, and these games are slower, which gives the player time for strategic thinking, resource management and planning to achieve victory. Most are warfare-based and so violence is not completely absent. These games are not suitable for children. Some examples are Advanced Wars I and II, Civilization V and Crusader Kings II. Simulation. These are video or computer games that simulate real-world situations under game settings. In this category, the 3 well-known games are racing simulators, flight simulators and Sims. There are lots of games in this class to entertain children. Some examples of simulation games are Football Manager, Farming Simulator 2013, The Sims and Evil Genius. Platformer. The platform game or platformer consists of jumping between suspended platforms of varying heights or obstacles and sometimes both to move forward in the game. Some examples of platformer are 40 Winks, Abuse, Action 52 and Adventure Island. Puzzles. Puzzle video games are a class of games that require puzzle solving. The kinds of puzzles that need to be solved can involve many problem-solving skills such as using logic, word completion, sequence solving, strategy and pattern recognition. Some examples of puzzle video games are Mario, Bejeweled 3, Cradle of Rome 2 and Hidden Objects. While on the subject, let's not forget sports games such as NHL 13, and FIFA Soccer 13 and arcade games such Chicken Shoot 1, Toy Story Mania and Angry Birds to name a few. Nowadays, video games are enjoyed by a wide cross-section of our society, from toddlers to grandparents, and these have been accepted by everyone as a good manner of entertainment and seen to be better than watching TV as it requires the viewer's participation and interaction. The general feeling is that video games do not provide any benefits to the player, and especially so in the case of children. Contrary to this belief, there are many benefits in allowing children to play certain types of games. Most important of these benefits is the development of cognitive thinking skills, fine motor skills, real-time decision-making abilities, hand-eye coordination, cooperative playing skills. Keeping video games out of the reach of children can only deprive them of these benefits. A child's imagination can be stimulated through role-playing and adventure games. Even if some of these games can seem tasteless due to its graphic nature and violence, they can play a positive and important role in a child's development by promoting teamwork, building confidence and improving motor skills. Playing such video games will only provide a child with a healthy means of expression. Certain video games are believed to teach children high-level thinking skills which they would benefit from in the future. Now that we have looked at the benefits for children, let's look at what benefits video games hold for the rest of us. Research into the pros and cons of video games are being conducted by various bodies including universities in some parts of the world, and the result is that the pros outweigh the cons in respect of benefits. When playing video games, you would need to react quickly and take split-second decisions in order to succeed in the given task. It is believed that this kind of practice would provide benefits in real life where you would be able to react with speed and take quick decisions. Brain scientists have discovered that a certain driving video game, created by a research and development team at the University of California in San Francisco, could improve the short-term memory and long-term focus of older adults. It was found that immersion in a game distracts the mind from pain and discomfort. Due to this reason, some hospitals have started to suggest that children and others undergoing painful treatments play games to reduce their distress and anxiety. Some video games have provided improvement in cognitive flexibility, which is the ability to switch quickly from one task to another. Researchers from North Carolina State University found a link between playing video games and mental well-being among the elderly. They found that those citizens who played video games, even occasionally, experienced a state of well-being and happiness. Gaming can also improve family relationships, as some of these games can and should be played together. According to some studies conducted at the University of Rochester, people playing certain titles of video games have shown improvements in tests in the following areas: multitasking, attention, accuracy, vision. The only thing a video game player or his or her family needs to ensure is that it does not become addictive in any way. A video game player shouldn't end up spending hours on end playing games and losing track of time and place, and while neglecting duties, personal chores and responsibilities. Another thing that the parents of minors need to ensure is that their kids get access only to educational or similar games which are suitable for their age group, and the good news is that there's a huge selection of games available that are appropriate for all ages. A video game content rating is a system is available in many countries, and they are used to classify video games into suitability-related age groups with respect to its contents, which, if followed, will help to limit the negative aspects of some of the games. Finally, if video game players are able to play in moderation, and stick only to the categories of games suitable for their respective ages, they can derive a number of benefits as cited above. These are some of the benefits of playing video games. If you want to have a more enjoyable playing experience, there are different websites that you can visit. One such website is http://www.choicestvideogames.com, where you can find a wide variety of choices which include the latest video games, consoles and accessories offered in the gaming world today. Feel free to visit the website to know more. Secrets to an amazing role-playing game. Role-playing games are a very specialist type of game that really need a far greater attention to detail than other less immersive genres. As the computerized version of the genre took off, there were a lot of money-hungry companies who decided to storm into the genre without really trying to understand what the vital elements of a role-playing game are. In some cases, these companies have actually had the audacity to buy out smaller companies who did know the genre, and they destroyed long-held legacies of great traditional games. Considering that this may have an impact on the future of computerized role-playing games, I have felt it to be of importance to educate these gaming giants in an effort to help them understand the only thing that matters to them. In order to sell role-playing games, you need an audience willing to buy the product, and if a company consistently puts out dodgy shooters in the guise of apparent role-playing games, they'll only destroy their reputation and go bankrupt. I know that the word bankrupt is a word that these money-hungry companies recognizes, and so I emphasize one point: try to sell dodgy shooters to role-playing fans and you will go bankrupt. Personally, I have been a role-playing gamer for about 30 years, and I fell in love with only two systems that I probably can't name because of article writing guidelines. What I can say is that very few game-producing companies have come even close to the pen and paper versions of the best role-playing games on the market, you know, the ones that people actually enjoy playing. I will say that I rejoiced when role-playing games became computerized, as it meant I could do my role-playing without the need to hunt for people with similar tastes, and even though some games have risen to become great role-playing games, they are sadly few and far between. On that note, of the styles of role-playing games that include pen and paper, computerized games and online games, there is only one type that can meet the fully immersive needs of a role player, and I'll reveal why later. Okay, what are the elements of a great role-playing game then? I'll give you one at a time, but the very most important piece of advice to keep in mind during this whole discussion is immersion. To be a truly great role-playing game, it has to grab the player's attention and not deliver diversions that allow the player to slip back into the reality of the real world. The player must be kept in the fictional world if they are to feel that they have experienced a great role-playing game. One of the most vital elements of immersion is a storyline, a really believable and yet gripping storyline. A role player doesn't want to load up the newest game and find to their dismay that storyline consists of the flimsy idea that they have to kill heaps of things to get enough experience to kill the apparent bad guy. Who wants to play a game where the bad guy is designated the bad guy without good reason? Have you played a game where you are part of one group of people and you've been chosen to defeat the other group of people, but there's no actual evidence that shows why the other group is bad? The worst of these are the recent thug games where one criminal organization wants to defeat another criminal organization and you're the hitman. Who is really that stupid to fall for such a terrible storyline? It's certainly not for intelligent role players. A good storyline can't be a shallow excuse for a war, and it has to be something you'd want to be a part of. The storyline also has to be included in the gameplay itself and delivered in a way that doesn't interrupt the reality of the gameplay either. There's nothing worse than a big cut scene that drops into the middle of the game and makes you sit idle for more than a minute or two. For role-play gamers, the immersion of the game comes from being the character, not from watching the cut scenes as if you were watching television. What's next? Advertisements? Another part of a great gameplay experience is being aware that you have been a part of the fictional world since you were born. This is conveyed by knowing where things are in the world and knowing who the current leaders are, along with knowing current events. This can be done cleverly by feeding snippets of information in a natural manner during conversations with non-player characters. Some extremely vital information can be revealed in otherwise meaningless banter, just like in the world you're immersed in right now. One thing that will jolt a role player out of a game is a sudden unwanted conversation with a hastily introduced character who explains where the next local town is and that you have to be careful because there's a war on or some such thing. This is only done in games where the maps are updated as you discover places of interest. Making a major city that lies not 10 miles from your current position something that you have to discover is ridiculous at best and only suits scenarios where you've been teleported into a new reality or you've lost your memory, although the latter should be used sparingly as there are already too many games out there that rely on the character having amnesia. Discovery can be implemented in far more subtle ways by having secret areas within already well-known places, and it is this that gives a role player a sense of discovery. Another immersion problem is the introduction of a love interest in a game without any participation on your part. You're playing away, minding your own business, and then all of a sudden, one of the infatuated characters that you never knew existed, has an impact on gameplay because of a supposed vital role they play in the group you're a part of. They should, at the least, allow a bit of flirting in the conversation paths before a love interest is thrust into the mix. For me, someone suddenly having that kind of interest is an immersion breaker because there was nothing at all that prompted a relationship. If there is a love interest possibility in the game, then it needs to be introduced in a believable way and shouldn't be out of the character's control. There was one game in which this happened, and the involvement of two love interests was the excuse for one of the non-player characters to do worse at being a support while the other became a great support. Sure, the idea was novel, but it was also very childish because it assumed that these two love interests were so enamored with the player that neither could do without him. It was worse than watching Baywatch or Desperate Housewives. I'm only going to add one more element to the mix because I just wouldn't reach a conclusion if I allowed myself to point out every requirement of the best role-playing games. As I stated before, the important factor is immersion. A real deal breaker for me is the inability to develop the type of character I want. I've encountered this more often than not in games where you have no choice over the skills that your character can develop. Of course, this is the worst scenario, and there are many games that allow limited development, but there are only a handful of games that allow a real sense of development. A truly great role-playing game has to allow players to develop in any direction and compensate for this flexibility by incorporating multiple paths through the game. There's no point in creating a computerized role-playing game if the character does the same thing in every single play-through of the game. The most annoying of these issues is a game where you can have a spell-wielding character but they develop the exact same spells at exactly the same point in every run of the game. It's a little more forgivable for warrior types, but even in this case there are many games which allow for dozens of different fighting styles. Now, if I were to continue with this discussion, I'd add other topics like the renaming of attributes with no good cause, allowing for more than one quest to be given at a time, real-world purchase requirements during the game and other ridiculous practices. I did promise to show which game type was the best for role-playing games though, so here it is. Non-online computerized games are the only games that allow for full immersion, and I'll explain why. Unlike tabletop games, you aren't interrupted by the requirement to physically reach out and move pieces, which takes you out of the role of the piece itself. Compared to pen and paper games, you aren't required to look up tables or enter long boring discussions on how rules should be interpreted. Massively multiplayer online role-playing games don't meet the requirements either, and I know some of you will be surprised, but when was the last time you were playing a computerized role-playing game and one of the other players had to leave because they had to go to work and they informed you it was a different time in their part of the world? Computerized role-playing games are the only role-playing game type where the characters stay in the game. You don't have to suddenly work out if something is allowable by the rules, and the user interface stays consistent so that the immersion is most efficient. In conclusion, the best role-playing games are standalone home computer-based and don't involve interaction with other real-world people who will throw a spanner in the immersion works. The storyline must be solid and delivered in a natural manner, a deliverable assumption that your character already knows the fictional world, no instant love interests out of nowhere, and the ability to develop your character in any direction seamlessly along with plot paths that allow for these developments. I only hope that the gaming companies pay attention to this and realize that they are making role-playing games for role players, and if they're not in the market for role players, then they should call their games by a different genre.